Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
Well, we have some very serious situations out there with the elder population. They're really at the mercy of, I would say, at their family members, first of all, in a sense, because even though family members want to do the right thing, they really don't know what the right thing is. And unfortunately, people who live up north and they're trying to take care of their older adult family member, they make mistakes. And it's unfortunate that this happens. I keep saying the word unfortunate, but I am so glad that I met an incredible lawyer, Michael Brevda, who is founder, or I guess he's founder of Senior Justice. Are you founder?
I am.
Founder of Senior Justice Law Firm. It's a great name. I love that. I don't always know that there's a lot of senior justice out there, Michael. And, as a gerontologist, I see a lot of things, and it's hard to put my finger on something, but I have a friend that goes in with a hip replacement, and they never come back out of a rehab center. Why is that? And how do you even figure out what's wrong?
Yeah, and I appreciate you having me on, Anita. As always, it's a pleasure to catch up with you, both on the air and off the air. No, unfortunately, there is not enough senior justice out there relative to other age demographics. The things that we encounter in our day-to-day litigating of these cases, had they happened to a child at a daycare center, had they happened to a 16-year-old patient at an ICU in a hospital, it would fetch nationwide news. But because it's happening to those who are older, who are, potentially demented or suffering from Alzheimer's, it usually goes off without a hitch, and there's never any uproar. There's never any backlash from either the court system or the court of public opinion, because unfortunately we don't like to talk about elder abuse, even though we are facing systemic levels of elder abuse, not only in Florida but nationwide. To address the point that you brought up about, you unfortunately knowing folks or seeing folks that go into rehab versus going into a long-term care wing. They're just supposed to be there for a short stint of rehabilitation, and they never come out. This is a prime example of the kind of cases that we handle at the law firm. This is an example of negligence, wrongdoing, whatever you want to call it, where somebody's there to get a certain kind of therapy. Presumably while they're there, they're reliant on the rehab staff for what we would call ADLs, activities of daily living. That's eating, showering, moving, repositioning, the things that you and I take for granted, that if you had a hip fracture, if you had a broken bone in your leg, if you're just coming off of a spinal surgery, you're not able to do those things on your own. So you're dependent on the rehab staff to do those things. What happens is, unfortunately, tragically, folks go in, they're supposed to be there for 3 weeks. The staff isn't helping perform their ADLs. They're not helping them stay clean. They're not helping them eat. They're not helping them drink. They never come out of the facility. They pass away. And the real travesty is that because the nursing home or the rehab, whatever you want to call it, is in control of the records, a lot of times they'll cover their tracks and they'll say, oh gosh, what a horrible natural death that this person sustained. It's so unfortunate. They were here for rehab after a hip fracture, and they had an acute cardiac event. They had an MI. They had a heart attack. It's hard when they are the controller, when they are the arbiter of those records, because there is no objective opinion as to what really happened. So it is so incumbent on the family, on the folks that hopefully are hearing me, that when they have a suspicion, when they're scratching their chin and they say, gosh, mom went in there for rehab. It was only supposed to be a short-term stint. She was healthy. I know I'm being told this narrative by the facility, but if you suspect something, you really should investigate it further. And there are a number of ways to do that.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because we just had an instance where someone I introduced to you, I think, had a very good case, but it's 5 years later, and you said it's 2 years. Talk about that. If you know something, don't wait.
Yeah, absolutely. In Florida, we've had pretty draconian tort reform, which means that they've really limited the remedies and the time frames that a potential claimant could actually do something about medical wrongdoing, nursing home abuse, assisted living facility injuries, things like that. So you have 2 years from the time that you knew or should have known of a potential negligent act. So it's very important, because when you call a law firm like Senior Justice Law Firm, like us, we can't just hit the ground running and file a lawsuit. We have to do a ton of investigating. We have to gather medical records. We have to get experts on board. So there is a built-in delay on our end, not intentionally, but things we have to do to vet a case. So time is really of the essence.
Well, as long as you start it within the 2 years, you're okay. It isn't right. As long as it's, well, let me tell you, and you don't know this, I don't think, because I haven't talked to you for a while. My husband was 93, and he passed away. It's now a year and a half. And he passed away. He was in the hospital, and he had twisted bowel. And so from there, and the surgeon said, great, no problem. I did a great job. He had to go to a rehab center. I stayed with him 24 hours a day for almost a month. I lived there. I slept there because I know that things can happen. It was a very good rehab center. That's the other thing. I knew there was a good rehab center. But because I'm very skilled at things, I was watching what was going on. They didn't clean them all the time. I started cleaning them. No, you can't do that. Well, someone's better come and clean them. They, sure, and they're short-staffed at night. Well, that's not my fault. I mean, they have to get more people, right? I'd say, how come you're not doing this? Well, we don't have enough people. I mean, so that's the one thing you hear. And then the next thing is all the people who are supposed to be taking care of when someone has to prevent bed sores, well, they're not always around. And you can see it start to happen. I mean, the worst thing that happened, though, is they have, and they shouldn't have happened, some floating doctor comes in. No one asked him to come in. And was a gastroenterologist. I guess I had gone out for 2 hours. And apparently he came in, and I knew what medication was being used. The next morning was a new medication. How did that happen? Well, so-and-so. I said, you must be kidding. I had to get him on the phone and said, don't come near my husband. Now, I'm just going to tell you, those are three kind of things. Now, he didn't die from something there. I mean, I believe what happened was what happened, but I was there all the time. Some of those things could have been very serious.
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm just telling you my own experience.
And I'm sorry that you had to live through that. I'm sorry for your husband's passing. I think the things that jump out to me is one.
Trust me, I would have called you.
No,
I would have called you if there was something that I felt. It was just these little minor, major, and that's what you're fighting. I think that how do you prove those things happen, right?
Yeah, and that is a conversation that we could have that would probably go over weeks, if not months, through expert testimony and things like that. But what I think is important in your personal anecdote, in your own life experience, is that, one, you're not necessarily a layperson. You're a gerontologist. You're somebody who is very wise to what's going on in this specific field. Two, you were blessed enough, you're lucky enough to have been able to put your life on hold and sit there basically all day and all night. Most people can't do that, whether it's because of work or geographic distances or whatever the issue is. And I think the most glaring thing to me is that despite you being a skilled professional in this field, and on top of that, being there, you're still noticing really bad deficiencies. You have to, and it's a good facility. And we won't talk about good and bad facilities because I don't want to defame anybody.
I was made sure where he went. So it's because there's some places which you just don't know. And
you know that.
I knew this
most
particular
folks
place.
Might not know.
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
so you
right.
know because you're an insider, but
Right.
most folks may not know that. So you have a good facility. You're there all the time. They know you know what's going on, and there's still shortcomings. So you have to question if, God forbid, it's an adult child and they happen to live in Chicago or Long Island, and they can't be there day and night, and they may not have the inside information to say this is a good place or this is a bad place. You really have to question what really goes on in these places, and that's where we get involved.
So, Michael, is there an answer? What is the answer really? Is this just healthcare in general? Is it that people are getting away with it? They charge a lot of money at these places, but I don't know an answer. I mean, they have to. Maybe it's you have staff ratio, and of course we know that some are better than others, but people are human who are serving these people, and they they have to go and talk to other people on the phone. They have to do other things. And meanwhile, it's been known that someone's in their bed. They try to get out. They fall, break their hip. And they say, oh, well, they don't even know that was why it happened.
The answer is, and you alluded to it in your question, is staffing. There, without a doubt, to be human is to make an error. Okay, there will be human error inevitably in facilities, just like there's human error on the roads with people operating motor vehicles. There's human error in all facets of life. However, what we see time and time again when we start getting hot on a facility, when I say that, I mean we're getting 5 or 6 calls a month on the same facility, whereas we won't hear from another facility for 3 years. So what does that tell you? There's a problem at nursing home X versus nursing home Y. So when we do, and we hire all kinds of experts, we actually have a staffing expert. And what he does is he gets all this publicly available CMS reporting data, the stuff that they represent to Medicare and Medicaid to get paid in terms of the acuity level of their residents. We compare that to the staffing that they actually provided. So it's really easy for a jury or a judge to understand because we're able to say, look, you asked for X amount of dollars from Medicare in order to care for the 100 beds you have in your facility. Look at what you provided in terms of the actual staffing. And your viewers or your listeners can't see my hands, but I think they could guess that what they ask for is a lot of money. What they provide is very low staffing. And the reason they do that is the largest item on their budget is staffing, hands down. I can't tell you how many clients come into our office and they say, I want to look at a case against this assisted living facility or this memory care wing or this rehab. And, I'll talk to them about it. And they say, when I put Dad in the facility, I just remember the lobby and the fact they had this chandelier and they had this really nice marble floor and they had granite countertops. And I thought, gosh, I could live there. And that's the hook that they want to set in their potential clients because, granite countertops and marble floors and chandeliers, those are expensive. They are a drop in the bucket compared to what it costs to have a registered nurse on every floor and 4 CNAs and 2 LPNs and 1 med tech and then a DON to oversee it all and then an administrator. These salaries with healthcare, these are massive budgetary items that if they can scrimp ever so slightly, that's major profits for the parent company. That's the problem, is the staffing.
Elder people have problems with respiration, and the respiration therapist, this was really important for my husband, and I knew it was supposed to come every 4 hours. All of a sudden, if they didn't come, I'd ask where they are, and they'd have to go find them, and then they'd come. Now, if I weren't there, they wouldn't have come. And so it's exactly what you said. They were short of respiratory therapists that day, but the person still there needs it. They should have a system where they bring someone else in. So you have hit it definitely on the head. It is the staffing, because many of these places have, good food. They have good physical therapy. They do those things. But if you don't have enough people for all the people who are in those beds, heads on beds, they call it, right? Heads on beds.
Head in every bed.
That's right. Head in every bed. That's what they want. And if they don't have people to be able to manage them, they shouldn't rent the room.
Right.
But they do. They just want to keep putting as many people in. And, look, I know a lot of people, and I don't want people to be mad at me, but I had a personal experience. So I really know what's going on. And it isn't that people are bad or, as you said, they're not bad. They're not trying to cheat. But they need to know what they're there for. They're there to make that person have every benefit that they can, or if you can't manage it, don't be in business or something. And that's why I love what you do. The trouble is you're not going to get enough of me to go and help you.
Right.
Because most of them is just what you said, Michael. They're somewhere else and they only can get what they're being told. So that's why geriatric care managers are very important also. They don't want to pay for them, unfortunately.
Right.
I mean, that's coming from the family. The family should hire a geriatric care manager who knows what's going on. They're your eyes and ears.
I personally, whenever there's a geriatric care manager on the case, rarely do I get a case where there's a GCM because the GCM is an advocate before the terrible event. Geriatric care manager.
I'm sorry.
before the geriatric care manager, before a terrible event like a broken hip, like a bed sore, like an aspiration pneumonia event, like what you were talking about with respiration problems and dysphagia, that geriatric care manager is in those care plan meetings, and the nurses that normally can kind of talk around lay people and use medical mumbo jumbo and confuse the layperson. You can't do that to a GCM, to a geriatric care manager. They know what you're talking about. So those advocates are, I think, worth their weight in gold, because I've seen what they charge. They're not terribly expensive. If you don't have the educational background like yourself, where you're not familiar with long-term care or elder care, or alternatively, if because you're not local, you can't be there every day, I think it's crazy not to hire a geriatric care manager to have an objective set of eyes on your loved one in the facility.
I want to stop for one moment and just tell you that you're listening to this very kind but very smart lawyer, and his name is Michael Brevda, Brevda, and he is the founder of the Senior Justice law firm. And the phone number to call, remember, we want you to start to write your phone numbers down. It's Pencil Talk Radio. The phone number is 561-717-0817. Again, 561-717-0817. So let me ask you something. From all that you've seen with all your experience, and I know it breaks your heart and so many times when you have to go after people, and that's what your business, your practice is. But what could you tell? Maybe there needs to be a list for a family. Here are 10 very hot items to keep that person safe. You have to think about that. Think about what some of those items would be if you were. I know, you don't want to get. This is your practice, and you're in it because you see wrongs being done. But if it were your mother, your father, what would you want people to put on that list? So people who are listening now would say, "Oh, I didn't know I should do that. Oh, is that what I should do?"
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring this up, Anita, because you're almost clairvoyant, and you do this every time I talk to you. But we're in the works right now of creating an app for your phone called the Nursing Home Survival Guide, which you're going to be able. It's in the early stages, but you're going to be able to keep a diary and follow checklists that we're coming up with. But to verbalize it in as succinct a manner as possible, you want to visit the facility at unexpected times. Don't be there every Tuesday at 3 p.m. because they know, okay, we need to clean Mrs. Jones because Mr. Jones is coming. You want to show up at all hours, at all times, at all days. When you do go there, even if it's your mother or it's your parent of the opposite sex, and you're trying to maintain some dignity, you still want to do head-to-toe skin audit, and that's a fancy way of saying look at their skin. Because a lot of times they're nonverbal, and a lot of times they're intimidated if they are verbal, and they're not going to say, hey, I'm sitting in my own waste, or hey, somebody hurt me. So what you need to do is you need to lift up their gown, and you need to really look at just about every inch of their skin to see, are there open areas? Are there pressure ulcers? Are there wounds? Are there bruises? I mean, I can't even tell you how many kids I've had that have come into my office, and it'll be a fracture case, a broken leg or a broken hip. And I'll say, how did you find out? Did the facility call you? And they'll say, hell no. I walked in and I saw my dad's leg articulated out as if, he was going out of the bed, but his left leg straight.
Oh, my heavens.
So it's as simple as something as just lifting up the bed sheets and looking, because a lot of times you'd be shocked, they won't report it. I think if you do those two things, there's obviously a lot of other things. If you visit often and at odd times, and you always look to see their physical body, how it's looking, are they losing weight, things like that. I think those two things will really, really keep the nursing home staff honest as to how your loved one's doing in there.
It's funny, I heard one woman who was visiting her husband. She always brought candy, and she said, why do you do that? She said, because then I know the nurses will be here more often. I mean, that was so insane.
Bribe them with sugar, yeah.
I mean, that is a terrible thing. The other thing that you're talking very much, though, about losing weight. Many times people cannot eat themselves. They just can't raise their arms or their hands or whatever. And there needs to be someone there who's assigned to feed them.
Absolutely.
Because when I was there, I was seeing people with the trays there, and nothing was even wasn't eaten, and they just took the trays away.
Yep.
And then nobody knows that. Were they going to report that Mrs. Jones didn't eat? Well, they're supposed to probably, but they don't.
They don't. And that all goes back to staffing and acuity level, which is the severity of the patient's condition. If you have a resident that needs human assistance one-to-one to eat, whether it's because they're in danger of choking or because they just physically can't put the fork to their mouth, a nursing home or a rehab or an assisted living or a memory care, they have one of two options. They can either staff appropriately to make sure that that person has one-to-one, or if they can't do it, that's okay. But you can't take that resident.
Right.
You have to say, I can't handle them. I'm sorry. In which case, you can't cash the check. The problems that we run into almost every time is they say, oh, sure, bring your mom in. We can handle it. They cash the check every month from Medicare or Humana or private pay, whoever's paying. And lo and behold, they don't have the staff to fulfill the needs of the resident.
Okay, so as this big lawyer, someone that's had a lot of cases, and I know you've won so many, what is the answer? You know, I know
Staffing.
we've been talking
Staffing.
Staffing.
It really is.
So, but how do we then make the nursing? I don't even want to call nursing homes. I think rehab centers are really so famous now because people they say I don't want to go to a nursing home. Okay, we're going to put you in a rehab center. That's a little fancier, right?
Right.
How do we? What's the word? I hate to say the word punish. How do we
keep them honest?
Yeah. How do we make those places do what they're supposed to do? And I mean, if we went into Publix and we bought food and it was rotten when we got home and all, we wouldn't go there anymore because but a nursing facility or a rehab center, we don't have that. We don't really have that ability.
No. It's there's a lack of administrative oversight. There's a lack of agency oversight, and there is, just because, picking on your example of Publix and the food, there is so much more scrutiny from governmental agencies on food quality and making sure that, we're not putting poison in our bodies, which thank God there is. Okay, I'm not saying we should cut that. I'm just saying that, call me crazy, but I think we should have the same kind of scrutiny over places that take care of literally our most vulnerable members of society, the elderly, the infirm, those who cannot voice their own complaints if they're not being taken care of or if they're being neglected. In my experience, it is the Wild West, and there is just there is ACA, there is DCF. These are places that I think are well-intentioned. I think they are horribly underfunded. I think the average caseworker has thousands of open cases. They show up to the facility, and guess what they do? They ask the nurse, hey, I'm looking into Mr. Jones's broken hip. What happened? Because Mr. Jones can't tell me what happened because he suffers from dementia or he's passed on. So we're at the mercy of the nurses. What do you think they're going to say? They're going to have a self-serving story, and the DCF worker or the ACA worker, although they're well-intentioned, I'm not criticizing them, they don't have the time or the resources to conduct a full investigation like we would. So they rubber stamp it and they say, look, I can't confirm any findings of neglect. And they move on to the next open case on their desk. If we actually had government oversight and administrative regulation to the point where if you kill people as a rehab, you lose your license, then I think there might be a sea change in the way that these places do business. But right now, it is... in my opinion, and from what we've seen, there's no one in the watchtower. Nobody is keeping track of who's harming whom.
Yeah, it's really a philosophy, too. I know that there are always people in the rehab centers, I'm going to specialize in that, who really care, and they try to get everything done, but they have to hire people. And I've noticed some people are fantastic, and some people, they don't get a smile. So that's the other thing, the hiring practices of the staff. It has to be done. I'll tell you something that and maybe I can't pull it off, but if I could have gone back, I would have brought my husband to our house and hired people there to do that. Now, some of the things would have been difficult, but I think he'd still be living. And I know I'd never go back because it's not a healthy thing to do. But after I really looked at things, I would have had the oxygen therapy. I would have had everything ready, and I would have had someone that did it. and then I have someone watching that person. And, a lot of people maybe can't afford it, but there are people who can afford it.
Sure.
And they rely on the rehab centers to do it. And that may be something that we're looking at now because I don't think it's working as well as we hoped it would be. Do you think so?
No, I don't. And the scenario that you're describing, one, you can't go back.
I know. I'm not going back.
I know.
I'm not going back, but in the future.
Right.
You have to look ahead and say, okay, is this a panacea? No, it's not.
No, of course not. No, it's not a panacea. But I will point out that overwhelmingly, when you look at the cost of somebody, like you said, your husband was on oxygen. A lot of folks are on feeding tubes or peg tubes.
And he had a peg tube. See, that was the worst thing because and when you ask about it, well, he has to have this because he can't swallow right. Well, we're working on this, but we're working on his swallowing.
Right.
But you see, I believe that feeding tube he should have choked rather than the feeding tube. I mean, I think about all this. Much as I'm not a professional nurse. I'm a professional in a different area of it. But boy, were my eyes open, Michael.
Yeah. But my point only was that for the overwhelmingly, I would say for almost everyone out there, it's not financially possible to take their loved one home.
I know.
And so they have to rely on these rehabs or nursing homes or assisted living facilities. And, they put their trust in these facilities. And when that trust is broken, and all the promises that were made by the marketing people in the front office, when none of them bear true, there's a series of emotions that come. Some of it's guilt, because a lot of the families second guess, why did I put them in here? Why did I do this? But I think at the end of the day, when those promises are broken like that, the only accountability, unfortunately, is a civil lawsuit.
We're going to get you back again, so I thank you so much. I'm really glad you're here. I mean, I have all this inside me, and I'm so glad I can talk to you. But it's Michael Brevda, and it's Senior Justice, and it's 561-717-0817. Don't wait. If there's something that's not right, call him.
Thank you, Anita.